Well, it is about 7 o'clock. We have about 45 people signed up. And I know a lot of people sign up so they can receive the recording afterwards. So this is just to let you know we are recording. So if you would like to refer the video to somebody afterwards, I will have it up on our website probably by Friday, and I'll send you all an email with the link. We have all of our programs up there. So if somebody wasn't able to make it, feel free to share. Let me just introduce myself first. I'm Lisa Murray. I'm the director here at the Bass Harbor Memorial Library. And thank you very much for coming out tonight to see Martha's pictures and stories about India. She offered this program to us soon after she came back in 2019. And it's great that we are able to offer it in this format because I think you did it in the winter. This is our winter travel series. So it was limited to the people who were in town. So this is great that we're able to offer it to so many people. So before I start the program, I just want to ask you to remain muted throughout the program. If you have a question, please type it in chat and I'll be monitoring that and asking throughout the program. I'll ask Martha your questions, but we'll also save time at the end for a question and answer period, which you feel free to unmute and ask questions. It sounds like there are other people who are on this trip, so it'll be a really interesting conversation to have with you all. Yep, so it's being recorded. I'll send the link to you, and I believe that's it. I am very pleased to welcome Martha Andrews Donovan back here tonight to talk about her trip to India in 2019. I believe you went for a month. She is the author of the poetry chapbook Dresser in Silk, a lecturer of writing at the College of the Atlantic, a resident of Bernard, and also a trustee here at the library. She will be joining us from Boston, where she is in interim teaching this winter and spring. Since moving to Mount Desert Island in 2016, Martha has been photographing the beauty here at the edge of land and sea each day. Her images of India became an extension of her daily practice of looking for the extraordinary in the ordinary. So thank you again, and I'll turn it over to you, Martha.
Great, thanks so much, Lisa. Thanks for offering this series. I've enjoyed going to the other talks in this series, and I'm just excited to be here tonight with all of you. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So I'm going to give you a whirlwind tour of India. I'm going to go fairly fast, I think, and then just slow down at certain points because it's hard to obviously compress a month's worth of travel into an evening. But I want you to see the kind of expansiveness of India and just the beauty in the world and the complexity and the gorgeous colors, and it's just an amazing country. So I will begin with, a map of India. So this just places India for you. I'm sure you probably all have much better geography than I am, but oops. What I'm trying to do is get the cursor. Can you see my cursor? Okay. So flew from, so I met Susan Henry, who's here, and we flew out of Dulles together when we flew to Dubai and spent, I believe it was 2 nights there. And then we flew to Ahmedabad where we joined the group. And then we wound our way through mostly the state of Rajasthan for 3 weeks. And then to Delhi and New Delhi. And then that was 3 weeks of the tour. And then I went solo down to South India, flew to Chennai, and then down to a small airport in Madurai, and then eventually ended up in South India in Kodaikanal. This is another sort of map of India. And the first question, some of you, not all of you, some of you already know the answer to this, but why India? Well, this is actually the Nellore, India, which is where my mother, Beatrice Whitter Donovan, was born in 1923. So she was born and raised in India, lived there for the first 18 years of her life, except for two furlough years when her missionary parents were in the United States. Her childhood was in India. So this is my grandparents. So this is Mildred, my mother's mother and father, Mildred and Ted. That's in Kodaikanal in South India, up in the mountains where my sister and my three aunts, I've got some cousins here whose their mothers also spent their childhoods in India and went to school in Kodaikanal. So this is my grandmother again. So this is them older, grandmother, Mildred, Ted, my mother, Beatrice, and this is Barbara. And this is Vera, and Mary was their fourth sister. Mary was at school when this photograph was taken. She went to prep school. Well, it was not called prep school, but that's what it was basically. And this is the bungalow in South India. So in the plains of India where my great grandparents were serving as missionaries. I did not get to that. That was not part of my tour, but this is my mom and my grandmother. This is the view from the rooftop of the bungalow in the village Pudali in Andhra Pradesh, the state of Andhra Pradesh in South India. And this is much old, this is like, I don't know when this photograph was taken, but it would have been the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so that is Kodi Lake and that is Kodaikanal. So that's in South India. So this will become clearer when I go through the tour. And this is my mom's. This is my mom right here. As a high schooler at Kodi, and I got to stand at that spot on my trip, which is pretty darn cool. This is my grandparents on a Coker's Walk, and you'll see that. That's a walk that I went on while I was there. This is a piece that my mom wrote in 1974. It was published in the Yale Review. Pretty good published cred for a housewife in Brunswick, Maine, without any kind of writing community, who wrote a reminiscence of her childhood in India. That was my understanding of her childhood, was mostly through this piece, actually. And I had always wanted to go to India to see, where she grew up. And circumstances aligned that I was able to do so. And I gave myself a really lovely 60th birthday present by going over to India for this trip. Previous to that, I've been doing a lot of writing about my mom's life. And this is a broadside from a project, and I'll just read it. So I'm basically, this is not going to be a history lesson on India. If you want that, you're going to have to read a book. But I might be able to answer some questions, but this is really going to be a kind of personal journey. So this is a broadside called "We Must Travel Back." The heat scrapes in and out of my lungs. A monkey guides me to the hills, lush and cool in the distance. My mother waits for me there. She is wearing a sari and her arms are open wide. She wants to tell me something. She wants to speak to me in Telugu. She wants to hold me in her arms. I have no idea who she is, this stranger who appears to me in my waking and my dreaming, this woman whose life was shaped and defined a long time ago in a distant land. I have no idea what India is like, this land that consumes my imagination, fires my desires into words. We must travel back, my mother and I. And so I did. I traveled back. And that happened because of, I'm not going to give you, I'm not going to give you all of the backstory, but this, okay, doesn't want to behave, hang on. Sorry, folks, I'm new to double monitors and all sorts of things all over the place here. Just trying to move this. Thanks for your patience. So Ian Lockwood, I just went on the internet at one point and was like, oh, I want to see pictures of Kodaikanal. And I stumbled across this website of Ian Lockwood, wrote to him and said, I'd love to buy one of your photographs of these beautiful photographs. He said, I'm in graduate school right now. I'm not doing it, but get back to me in 2 years when I'm done and I would figure it out. So 2 years later, I circled back. Hello, me again. I want to buy one of your photographs. And he said, great, that's awesome. I work through, he's in Sri Lanka. He said, yeah, let's coordinate this through my mom, Sarah Ann Lockwood, who lives in the States. And so long story short, I became friends with Sarah Ann Lockwood. And this is Sarah Ann Lockwood, who was the tour leader of this group. And she knew of my, long desire to go to India, and let me know that she was gathering together 10 people from all sorts of parts of her life to take this trip. And this is a picture of her that I took in Jaipur. This is her husband, Merrick. So when Sarah Ann said, I'm doing this 3-week tour of Rajasthan, I said, that's awesome, but I really want to go to South India, which is where my mom grew up. And she said, well, my husband Merrick's, we have a house in Kodai. So, you could just go after the trip. You can go hang out with Merrick at our cottage, Jean cottage there. So it's like, okay. So Merrick was my host. Her husband was my host. She was still, well, you'll see. I'll tell you more about that. But anyway, she was not in Kodai at the same time. This is the crew. So this is the group of us. So Sarah Ann, our leader, and Ed, who's a relative by marriage, and Susan, who's here tonight, and me, and Sharon and David. David is Merrick. So Sarah Ann's husband, Merrick's brother, David, and his wife, Sharon, who are from the DC area. And Sarah Ann and her husband and David, they all went to Kodai. So they were children of missionaries and grew up in South India as well. And this is, where's my purse, cursor? Christine, who's here, was on the trip from California, and Mimi, and they were, and Mimi was she your friend, or was she Joanna's? Whose friend was she? Oh, she was Sharon's friend, right? So Sharon and Mimi were good friends, and then Kristen and Joanna and her husband Shagata were friends from California. And Vivek, who was our Indian tour guide, who was delightful, just wonderful, really knowledgeable, great sense of humor, just delightful. We just all fell in love with Vivek. So I'm skipping over Dubai and just lining us into, oh, actually I'm not. This is the day, this is actually the day of departure. This is actually my little notebook. So I kept a lot of little notebooks. So this is one little notebook for just notes. This is a beautiful journal given to me by my dear friend Tracy Baker White, who couldn't be here tonight, but it doesn't look so great in here, but it's beautiful. And then this was sort of my daily record, and this was my writing journal, and this was my just take notes. And so this is I actually transcribed it. So through that book, I wrote this on the plane. My journey to India begins from a small fishing village on the backside of an island in Maine to eventually Kodaikanal, an island in the sky. I'm traveling from island to island. What does it mean to live in a place that identifies as an island? These remote spots, both resort areas that draw tourists, 3 million each summer on MDI. How many to Kodai, honeymooners, hippies, pilgrims, expats? Both places are feeling the pressure of tourism on the landscapes and natural habitats. And yet there is also a strong sense of community on islands, such as dentist Matilda Resnick seeing me on an urgent basis, such as Jayashri Kumar welcoming me warmly to Kodaikanal. My journey is from an island in Maine to an island in India, Bernard to Essex to Boston to DC to Dubai to Rajasthan to South India. The crew on Emirates today reflects 16 different languages. This is a journey that takes me well beyond my comfort zone into a world that is far beyond the little fishing village of Bernard, to a country of many languages and dialects and religions, a history that is many layered, like a palimpsest, one civilization layered on top of another, revealed in the archaeological excavations, And so it is too with family history, the layers of generations, how each generation is both new and old, carrying the genetic matter of previous generations, sometimes called to similar passions and occupations and interests. What layers remain for me? What do I carry with me of my mother? Her love of writing and art and music and food and travel. This trip puts my needs first, my desire to see where my mother grew up, to walk where she walked, to see the landscape she saw, to eat the food she ate, to wind my way up the Western Ghats as she did as a child, that switchback journey she described so well. So that was just notes on the airplane. So 3 weeks across Rajasthan, land of the kings. The focus was on forts and palaces and stepwells. And you're going to go on this quick tour with me. So this is where we went from along. This is the path. And it was really well, I did not go on to Agra, but so my journey stopped here. But this was a really well-designed tour. We alternated between cities and countries. So you'll see as I take you through this kind of whirlwind tour, we're going to move from city to country, because it can get pretty overwhelming in the cities. It's a lot. So this is just a little background about the state of Rajasthan, but for the sake of time, I'm going to actually skip over it now, but we can come back to it if people want a little more history. So week one took us to Ahmedabad and then Dungarpur. This is the first hotel we stayed at. And there was poetry on the bed. Every night there was poetry on the bed. I was like, I have landed in the right place. Wall upon the floor, window in the wall, curtain on the window, and we pined for the sky. So it's a Gujarati poet. So I thought, okay, this is going to be okay. We visited the old city probably 3 hours after we arrived. I think we got there close to 6 a.m. in the morning, and by 9 a.m. we're traveling by rickshaws into the old city. I'll go a little bit slower. As I said, I'm not going to talk about each of these photos. It's just to give you a sense of the things we saw. This is just naming the Haveli, which is a house, of a wealthy person that is now inherited this and is renovating it. As many of these sort of the places that we stayed at were mostly places that had been parts of princely families that basically need to turn them into hotels, heritage hotels, to maintain them. I mean, to sustain them. So this was in the process of being rehabbed. It's really gorgeous. We didn't stay here, but so it's an urban heritage hotel. But some of the things that you'll see that drew me were obviously textures, the details, doorways. We traveled in the month of January. It seemed very fitting, the month of openings and beginnings and transitions. We went to the Calico Museum of Textiles on the second day, I believe it was, that we were actually in India. And it's hard to read these notes, even for myself, but these are the notes I took based on a talk. We couldn't take photographs in here, so I couldn't take any photographs of the textiles. Visuals equal universal language. Storyteller engages the confidence of strangers. The mirror work lights up the night like stars in the sky. Fabrics with gold. With age, the lights of the gold glow stronger. The storyteller engages the curiosity of the audience. Fabrics tell a story. Folks making fabric may be poor and inarticulate, but the stories they tell create an intimacy in the audience, the kind of intimacy that is often lost in modern times, as in, what is your story? Tell me your story. So already in the first 2 days, story was what I was engaging with. This is a textile that I'm wearing right now. This was from my mom. This is from India. So this is, maybe 100 years old. This is a textile I bought in Udaipur, a vintage textile, and there's the mirror work that was being described, lighting up the sky. While we were in Ahmedabad, we visited the school that's run by the Vizamo Kids Foundation. and it's foundation, an NGO to support education for youth in the Gujarati state of Gujarati, but around Ahmedabad, who are underprivileged, to provide an education for them. The photograph on the left is one of the things that was really important to my grandmother was education, particularly for girls. And she and just fortuitously, some money arrived to my grandparents one day from the Alabama church in Alabama, New York, that had disbanded, and remembered that their minister, my grandmother's father, had a daughter in India, and they sent some leftover funds to my grandmother and grandfather, and my grandmother was able to establish this boarding school for girls along a dream she'd wanted to do for quite a long time, but didn't have the resources, but then finally did. This is some musings. So the second or third day, I won't be able to keep track of the days, but January 12th, the rest of the crew went to do some more touring in Ahmedabad, but I was feeling a bit overwhelmed at the beginning. It's a sensory overload, and I knew I needed to just take some time to just sort of sit. So I just stayed behind and sat by the side of the street in a cafe and wrote. And at the bottom, I wrote, "Here there is an incessant sound of horns, people signaling, 'I'm here, watch out for me.' It is amazing to see the traffic. The rules seem to be more suggestion than command. Cars, buses, tuk-tuk, rickshaws, bicycles, pedestrians, and cows all share the road in a chaotic mess that streams endlessly." And I see Nancy Kurtz nodding her head. She's been to India and she knows this. And, I think, and Chris, we were in the rickshaw together that day, weren't we? I'm pretty sure you and I in Ahmedabad were together. And I think we were pretty sure we were going to get killed, right? And then there was this moment where I thought to myself, but nobody's getting killed. Like, I don't understand the rules here, but the people who are driving seem to get right. How to do this. Like, they seem to understand it, and they're the ones who are driving. So I just was like, first lesson, let go. You gotta let go. It's like, you're not in control. It's a good life lesson. There's some of the sort of scene in Ahmedabad. That's a tuk-tuk. This is the sort of all sorts of, this is actually pretty mild traffic, but various transportations. Speaking of crazy transportation, we're on a highway. They were going pretty fast. Show you different modes of transportation I saw. We actually did go on a boat like that. That's in Udaipur. This was our bus. We traveled in quite luxury. These are Jeeps in the Tiger Park. Some by car, but you can see people hanging off of cars. Pretty typical street scene. Rickshaws in Delhi. Train to Delhi. So outside of Ahmedabad, so on the tour, we stopped at our first of 3 stepwells that we saw. So that was the forts, palaces, and stepwells. And they are like amazing. These are inverted structures. So they're underground structures that go down to wells, in the desert. And so Rajasthan is a desert state. And I mean, just stunning works of architecture. And so these would have been places to cool off in traveling, sort of think of them as a kind of a motel in the 14th century, with air conditioning being just the coolness. This goes down, I think, 7 stories. I believe it's Susan was the only one who went down the whole way with Vivek. Awesome job, Susan. I did not want to go down all the way where there would be bats and snakes and who knows what else deep down in there, but went down about as far as a few stories. This was one of my favorite. What'd you say? Oh, okay. I thought somebody was saying something. So this is began in the 13th century. A lot of these fort palaces began in a certain century and then, were built over hundreds of years. This was just this but a ruin of a fort. This one has not been kept up. It's been, hurt by earthquakes, vandalism, lack of maintenance. We got a private tour of it. Just stunning. You will see other, well, I don't know if I have others of this, but so this is the screen. So as some of you may know, women both in the Hindu and Muslim faiths would be in seclusion or purdah. And so it was a way for women to look out without people being able to see them. So that's part of that. This is one of my favorite photos. I mean, look at just the layers, wow, just layers and layers. Here you can see, look at this. I mean, you can tell this is like just hanging on, right? You can see, I mean, this is a real crumbling structure, probably not super safe to even be in, frankly, but I was glad that we could go and tour it. And the frescoes, just stunning. This one's so gorgeous. This is Krishna and Radha, beloveds. This is the Uday Bilas Palace Hotel that the princely family, has, is one of the heritage hotels that maintains itself through being a hotel. Beautiful courtyard. This is our group. Notice what we're wearing. A lot of people think like when you go to India, you're going to be like wearing t-shirts. We were cold. Rajasthan is a cold in January. We were often cold. Now, what they did do, however, was deliver. Got to get the cursor again. Where'd it go? This little lump here, that little lump there are hot water bottles. So Susan and I came back to our room after dinner, after an amazing dinner. And I was like, what's in our bed? Like, is there an animal in our bed? What's in our bed? It turned out to be hot water bottles. And so there I discovered why my mother in Brunswick, Maine, always had a hot water bottle, in the winter. This was, I guess, a British tradition that, came over to India, and they had hot water bottles at Kodi, because Kodi at 7,000 feet elevation is cold. Most everywhere I was in India was cold, except for the plains of South India. I mean, is this not amazing? It's like, I gotta tell you, go to India. I will say that when people said, "Oh, are you looking forward to going to India?" I was like, well, I'd laughed nervously. It's like maybe 3 generations of my family could have lived in Italy or France. I was like, it's not exactly that I want to go to India. I feel like I need to go to India. I can see that Martin wrote a chat. He said, this trip was in a sense a long delayed response to the death of your mother, correct? And yeah, this was a very personal, this was a pilgrimage. Absolutely, it was a pilgrimage. And so this was a need to trip, not so much a want to trip. And it was well outside my comfort zone. I've never traveled alone by myself. I mean, obviously I was with a lovely group of people, but I was going as a single person. And this was a big leap for me. But I'm so glad I did it. So then still at week 1, we go to Udaipur, which is city, and then Rangpur, which is village. This is one of the heritage hotels. This is right on the lake. I mean, Udaipur is called the Venice of India, as you can see why. That's looking out towards this, that's looking out towards the city palace. This is just where we had meals right on the lake, Lake Petrola. This is heading into the old city. You see women washing their clothes. We went into this Hindu temple, and they were having a celebration, celebrating the end of winter. And it was amazing. It was like, incense and singing and chanting and splashing of water. And our tour guide, Sarah Ann, said she had never been to a celebration. It was just pure luck that's what had happened. We were just wall to wall people inside with this amazing Hindu celebration. And these are carvings on the outside. So this is the city palace. I mean, the colors, the colors. The frescoes, of course, everywhere were just gorgeous. You know, most of these palaces were combinations of forts and homes. So exterior fortresses, and then interior courtyards and palaces and just amazing rooms. This is still Udaipur, again called the Venice of India, as you can see why. It's one of my favorite photos. This is actually an island in Lake Petrola where they would go for summer. This was their summer home for the Indian princely family. I think I already showed that. Cows, of course, in the street. This is on the way. So it's leaving the city and heading to the country. We came, you know, one of the nice things is going with Vivek, because he knew all these, you know, we could just stop the bus in the middle of nowhere and he'd know these cool things that were just happening. This is a Persian wheel. So it's a very ancient form of drawing water up to irrigate this, you know, again, we're in a desert state. And this is just so amazing for those of my friends here who have connections to Harp. So we have cisterns at our cottages. So we're very mindful of water conservation. So water stuff really interests me. So you can see as the oxen is going around, it's pulling up these buckets of water. Well, I guess you can't see, I should be pointing with a pointer, but, and look at that, just lush green. So this is from a photograph among my mother's papers. So similar, I don't know what kind of oil they're processing there, but here's that same sort of, you know, oxen going around in a cart to create. So it's like, when I saw the Persian whale, it reminded me of this photograph that I had seen. Then we, on our way through the mountains, this is the Aravalli range. It's like billions of years old. It's you know, would be like the Himalayas have been ground down over all these years. I suppose that's true of many places. But anyway, this is a Jain temple from the 15th century, just total remote place. I didn't take too many pictures of me there, but that's one of me in the front. Oh, but that's actually when I actually am wearing a light cotton thing, because that day was warm.
Martha, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
I think it's worth mentioning about the Jain temple, that of all those pillars, and I just forget now how many there are hundreds, but all the designs on each pillar are different. There's no two pillars that have the same, you know, the same stone carvings on them. They're all different.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. And yeah, please jump in anytime you and Susan have stuff that you want to, you know, bring into this. That would be wonderful. I found that I will say that for me, like we listen to audio tapes as we walk through here, and other places. Obviously there were lots of, in museums or fort palaces, there'd be a lot of, you know, printed matter to read. And I find that I read them, I listened, but for me, a lot of this tour was mediated through the camera. I think in some ways it might have been a kind of veil of a way for me to not be overwhelmed with the sensory overload. Was it sort of helped contain things for me. So that's just one of my thoughts of, like, that's why I feel like I don't think I retained a whole lot of history details, although more than I probably give myself credit for. Then we found ourselves at this heritage hotel in a small little village, Raleigh, and just a beautiful little village, rural Rajasthani life. Again, this was a hunting lodge for Indian princely family. We were able to go in. This woman, the very villagers are super friendly. This woman allowed us to come in and visit her in her home. And that's her cooking. You can't see it, but her kids, her two little kids were in another room. I guess it, you know, it just made me realize how little we need, really. Very simple, but just, we'll say the Indian people were so generous and so gracious. I mean, now in some of the cities, they were a little bit, some of the merchants were a bit aggressive, as you've heard, perhaps, you know, just like not really wanting to take no for an answer, and like, I don't want to buy that. Less so in South India. I found that when I would say no, I'm not interested, it was always just, you know, thank you, have a good day. There was no pressure. And then Jodhpur city, and then Chhatrasegar, a tented camp. So city country, week 2. That's an amazing fort, begun in the 15th century, built over 500 years, built right out of, as you can see, just coming right out of the cliffs. Hard sometimes to tell what's built and what's actually natural. And that's Fort of the Sun. This is a mausoleum. Actually, this particular one, well, nah, never mind. Take that back. Or maybe Susan or Christine can remind me if that was sort of a model for the Taj Mahal or not. I don't actually remember. But of this same sort of architectural influence. That's inside the city palace. I mean, inside the fort. So look here, this is cool. So this is one of the miniature paintings, beautiful Mughal paintings. So there's the Persian well. You can see it right there. So this is a step well in the city, right it's in the old part of the city. And it used to be just a trash heap. I mean, it was just like a place that people just dump trash in. And that's true of a lot of step wells, but they've been reclaimed over the years. There's so many step wells throughout India. I would love to go back and actually see many more. I found them just utterly fascinating. So this was part of a revitalization project in the old city of Jaipur. Oh, this I put in here for my family friend Susan. So this is a weaving cooperative in this village.
Yeah, that's so cool, Martha.
Yeah, I knew you would love that. So just look, Susan is a weaver, a fine weaver, has her own loom. And yeah, I stupidly did not buy one of these rugs. That was a mistake. Gorgeous. So here's again, like, Vivek just, just saw folks in the field harvesting and said, let's go say hi. It's like, okay. Everybody was just so lovely. There's so many photos I'm not including of just stopping on the side of the road and meeting people. Then we found, this was on our way to this camp. This was another one of the rural parts were the parts that were my favorite, though I was happy to see the cities. Chhatrasegar camp, this is, again, maybe because of my interest in water. And so this is, this incredible reservoir of water in the desert state. Dam was built in 1890. And this is from their own view book. So this is an aero view. So we stayed in these tents right on top of this dam, just, looking right out. So these are steps down to the water. This is inside of the tent. This is the one that Susan and I had shared. And beautiful flowers waiting for us. And this is my feet, this is me lying on the bed looking out across the reservoir. I could have stayed there. I wrote to my friend Tracy. I said, Tracy, we got to get a grant, and you and I are going to come here, and you're going to paint, and I'm going to write poetry, which we did do, but not there. This is higher up, looking across the camp. So that is the moon. This is the sun setting to the west, obviously to the west. This is dinner, and best food. This is like the Lost Kitchen of India. So those who are from Maine know the Lost Kitchen, like totally remote and totally unbelievable. And this is sunrise. So this is looking to the east. This is sunrise, looking over the Ar Valley Mountains in the distance. Morning breakfast. Now you really shouldn't be eating fruit that you haven't peeled, or yogurt, but I did, and I didn't get sick, and it was really worth it. It was so good, those pomegranates. This is journal musings while I was there. So Mary Oliver died just a few days before we were there, and it called to mind her a multi-part poem called Sometimes, and one of the parts is Instructions for Living a Life. Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. And that seemed like a very good way to approach my trip in India and life. Sunrise. My friend Tracy Baker White did a painting of that. And after I came home from India, I wrote this poem some years later, Butterfly Sky. The world offers itself to your imagination. Mary Oliver, Wild Geese. I used to imagine birds and figures in the roof above my bed, as others saw butterflies or peacocks in the clouds. Whole landscapes appeared in the knots and grains of the weathered barn boards. Years later, at the edge of a desert, the Ar Valley Hills, 350 million years old, became a woman sleeping in the distance, and the clouds became arms embracing the rising sun. I rose early that day to listen to the terns and cormorants as they lined the steps of the dam, those jagged, irregular slices of slate that led down to the reservoir, glistening with the bounty of the monsoon. Hundreds of birds had flocked there, like the painted storks that flew across the Himalayas to find their pink-feathered way to this astonishing, improbable place. This is another painting that Tracy did based on mine. Just because of time, I'm going to skip over this poem, another one that I wrote. We walked into a village that is supported by the water of this dam that helps irrigate these beautiful fields. Another one of a few photos I took of myself there. This was rural Rajasthani life, chopping wood, making the jugs of the pottery for the jugs of water. It's a village really operating on a barter system. So his father had recently died and he had taken over. He's the village potter and he's making water jugs, and they would trade the water jugs or barter the water jugs for other things. And that's his mother. She was lovely. This woman's she does spices, and this is the silversmith. I bought a bracelet from him. Shepherd, or I don't know what those are. What kind of animals are those? I should know. All right, so then week 3, city, Jaipur, and then we spent some time in a tiger preserve, Ranthambore. It's a puppeteer in Jaipur. This is a very famous, the Palace of Winds, actually very, very thin structure. But again, this would be an example of the screens. So this would be where the royal women would be able to, Indian, would be able to look out on the scene below without being seen. Jaipur City Palace. This is famous doorways in the Jaipur City Palace. The 4 seasons are sort of represented, different figures. And then Amber Fort, also super impressive. Oh, sorry. And then this is all mirror work. And then the tiger preserve, we were there for 3 days. We went on 3 tours of the park. We never saw a tiger. And I think it was, again, a very good lessons in patience and in realizing that if you get obsessed about a particular goal, you can miss out on an awful lot of beauty. And so first time we were all just like really wanting to see a tiger. And then I was like, wait a minute, look at what else is going on here. I mean, we never saw tigers, but we saw a lot of really beautiful stuff. That's also a fort at the top. I mean, it's just stunning. This is a step well. They didn't allow us to get out of the Jeep because it wouldn't be safe, because we might run into a tiger. And we could see other kinds of animals. And then we went to Delhi. We took a train. I don't know if I ever had a conversation with my mates, but for some reason in my mind, because we're staying in pretty luxurious heritage hotels, I had a feeling that I was thinking like, the train was going to be like some swanky thing, but it wasn't. But I have to say I had a really lovely nap on that top bunk there. It lulled me to sleep, and it just was delightful. This is in the old city, and look at those wires. I mean, it's just, it's a happening busy place in the old city of Delhi. And this is jalebi. Our mom writes in her reminiscence about sneaking out to go to the bazaar, not here in Delhi, but up in Kodi. So they were forbidden to go into the bazaar in town to go get the sticky sweets like jalebi. But I did have a jalebi in Delhi. Tomb of Sultan of Delhi in the early 16th century. One of my favorite pictures. Aren't those girls adorable? Oh my God, they were so great. These schoolgirls were a whole bunch of, I don't know what was going on, but there were a lot of school kids at Humayun's tomb that day. And they just had such spirit and sassiness. And that's this garden tomb really was one that was sort of an inspiration for Taj Mahal. There is quite a lot that I could be saying about all these things, but we're going to have a question and answer period. So I'm happy to answer questions that people might have. This is kind of an interesting picture because you can see a kind of amalgam of things. So this is the sort of palimpsest nature of what I would call the palimpsest nature. But so the sort of Islamic rulers that came in, they kind of tore down Hindu temples, but then they would keep parts of the columns of these temples and merge them with their own mosque, although they would carve off the deities on the Hindu temple. They would like kind of, cannibalize them, if you will. So that was a whirlwind trip through Rajasthan. And then I headed 12,000 miles south to go to Kodaikanal, but spent a couple days first in the Chettinad region, which is also a very remote area. It was an area where very kind of wealthy merchants lived and built these amazing mansions that were pretty incredible. Now it's sort of like a kind of a bit of a ghost towns there, because after World War II, their business kind of dried up with all the changes happening, and people couldn't really afford to keep these mansions up. So some, you know, they kind of, they're in, a lot of them are in quite big disrepair, but some of them are still being maintained, and some have been used as sets for Bollywood, you know, movies, and some you can tour and, you know, pay money to enter so they can help sustain them. But this is Karikudi. I stayed at the Bangala Hotel. This is the Bangala Hotel. Has it's another kind of lost kitchen place. This is ranked one of the top restaurants in all of India. If you do go to India, find your way to this. Is like in Nowheresville, but it's amazing. This is run by a widow, Mrs. Miyapam, who's like that 82 at the time, and a force. You know, I think had, you know, very high standards and exquisite taste and amazing cuisine. And it's Julianne Moore and Michelle Williams had just stayed there. So if you know, they're Hollywood actresses. But that's for my sister-in-law, Judy, who doesn't know anything about Hollywood folks. Anyway, that's an inside joke. So there's a meal that I don't think it does justice to how amazing that food was. I wish I'd taken more photographs of food. I don't know why I didn't, because the food in India was amazing. So this is like one of those mansions. So think about, like, you know, mansions in Newport, Rhode Island, right? So these were just amalgams of, you know, tile from Belgium and teak from Burma, you know, just because these were international merchants. The Chetniers. And more weaving. So in this region, went to this weaving cooperative. This is a temple in South India. I know, Nancy, you got to see a lot of temples. This one is it's called Kuvalasar. I'm not sure that you were there, but you can tell later in Q&A. So this is inside that temple. This is 1,000 years old. This was a vintage carved panel from that region that I purchased at a salvage shop. And so right here, I'm drawn to fragments, drawn to stories of loss and persistence. And then to Kodi, an island in the sky, 6,982 feet above sea level and nearly 8,103 miles from Mount Desert Island as the crow flies. And this is on the plains of South India, which down there was hot. And we're going to head up the mountain through villages, different cottage industries, starting to see the mountains in the distance. These are the Western Ghats, the eastern side of the Western Ghats. This was not a paved road when my mother went there. There were open-sided buses, and she would swing around the pole of those open-sided buses, and her mother was afraid she would fall down the mountain. But they had a good time traveling up there. It was that's pretty dried out now, but this is Rat Tail's Fall in the monsoon that's gushing. It's hard to give you a sense of how twisty turny it was, but it was a okay, I just have to let go. I'm not in control. This guy is a good driver. Yes, he's passing cars at the hairpin corners, but he's still alive, so I think I will be too. Heading up the mountain, heading into Kodi, and then driving into my host's house, Shelton Cottage, on Lower Shola Road in Kodaikanal. The very first night we went up even higher than Lower Shola Road. So this is right on the edge of Coker's Walk, looking over the mountain there, over the edge. So there was a lovely tea party. My first night there, all these wonderful people connected to the community who welcomed me to town. And that's That's looking down to the plains. Never had clear, was pretty, was never really clear while I was there. So I didn't get a great view, but our mom described, you could, on clear nights, you can see the lights below in the plains. This is Cody Lake. It's a man-made lake, but this again is at nearly 7,000 feet elevation. And then I had a tour of Cody School the next day. And this is a picture of the class of 1940 hanging on the wall of the gym. That's our mother. That's the piano that she played. That's the auditorium. And I'll just take you through some of the campus. These walkways are there because of the monsoons. And this is the dorm that our mother lived in, Boyer Hall. That's me standing where our mother spent a lot of her childhood years. That's the front side of Boyer. That was the original building of the High Clerk. It was originally called High Clerk. I think it was actually maybe pronounced differently, High Clare. It was a hotel, and it turned into a school for missionary kids in 1901, I think, or maybe 1900, and then became Cody School. This is me, whatever. This is the lake. And then in the evening, that's partly the school and partly the Carlton Hotel. This is a cemetery that this lovely woman, Billy, who made it her job to reclaim this cemetery from complete overgrowth. She was the total character. I really enjoyed Billy a lot. This is Janika. Janika, her husband, John, is the gardener for the Shelton Cottage. And they live in part of the cottage, and they, we had a lunch and garden party, and they made biryani. She and her husband made the meal. Merrick is not a cook. Sarah Ann told me that I probably would be very hungry when I was in Cody because her husband didn't cook it. Actually, she was right. I was actually kind of hungry. But he was a wonderful host, delightful. This is this was the Kodaikanal Missionary Union building where our grandparents would have hung out for social events when they'd come up to visit their kids at Cody. This was sort of the social center. Now it's a library, and it's run by this lovely woman, Jayashri Kumar, who I really enjoyed spending time with. We had lunch together and met several times during my week in Cody, and she just was a lovely woman. I wish I had a photograph of her. So it's the library there. So just had wonderful resources. On the other side of that building was the school's archive. So I also spent several days in the archive. So this is a photograph of the early days. So this is 1910. In the archives was a copy of my mother's India Shangri-La piece. So she had sent it to them, and it was in the archives. This tells me that my aunt, Barbara Witter, so Barbara Witter's, some of their sons are here. She got good posture honor roll in 1932. Good job, Aunt Barbara. This is Mary Witter, another sister. So she seems to be writing about like who's doing what, like graduates, what they're doing and where they're going, sort of like some kind of record of alums. And this is, so Ted and my cousins, Ted and Bill, who are Vera's sons, it looks like she sent maybe the tape of the trip that Ted and so my cousin Ted and his mom Vera had also gone to Cody. So they've been to Cody. So in the Q&A, they can also answer questions. And they went to Puddley. So they actually saw where the girls spent when they're not during their vacation times, when they weren't up in the mountains. This is, oh yeah. So my sister's writing in the chat. It's true. These kids were sent, my mom and her three older sisters were sent off to boarding school at age 5 or 6. So it's pretty intense. So they spent a lot of their childhoods here and away from their parents. So there was a deep emotional cost to all of this. This is Coker's Walk. So this is from the archives. So this is what I walked on that's now paved. This is a view. Mount Paramal is the iconic sort of peak there. And that's it. So that's from 1930. This is me on Coker's Walk, just getting a little glimpse of it through the mist and the haze. So you can see it's all paved now. But it's the view. This is the church that my grandparents would have been visiting when they were up there for vacation. I was able to lead some workshops for the school. So this is with some of the students there. And then later I gave workshop for both students and community members. That's at the KMU building. And this is Cow in the Street. This is market day. This was Sunday market day. Beautiful, beautiful produce, beautiful colors. So now our mom never went back to India, and she, always said she didn't really want to go back because she just wanted to have it fixed in her memory as the way it was. And the truth is, she probably would have been pretty even reading about people who were Cody alums in the 50s. They speak of what has happened. So in some ways, it's like Mount Desert Islands. It's become a place that's attracted so many people, but it's suffering from that. I mean, it's wonderful that people are finding that it is a vacation spot for Indians, and but it's getting overrun, and it's putting pressure on the town, putting pressure on the ecosystems up here, which I didn't get to. I only stayed in Cody. I didn't go out to hike, which I'd like to do sometime in the future. Oh, this is a Kumbli Pucci. So if you Mainers, I know we're all worried about the brown-tailed moth. Well, I got to tell you, this is no fun either. The Kumbli Pucci, which is a toxic hairs, got me in Cody, and it was extremely painful. So stay away from the Kumbli Pucci. This was the last day that I was there. This was George Penner and his wife Vera, and this place kind of reminded me. If you read My Family and Other Animals, or watched the recent PBS series, Durrells and Corfu, it's kind of like that. It's just sort of like there were animals. They had rescue dogs, and here's like this rescue, I don't know, chipmunk or whatever that it's feeding milk to. There's just like animals everywhere. It was just all these various people from different, it's a very expat kind of community. And it was really lovely to get wrapped into all these various little, like, brunches and parties and things. Kind of made me feel like probably like that with my grandparents when they were up there. Well, maybe not quite so, but. And that's Shelton Cottage again. That's my last day. So John on the left. And then Rahuma, who was my driver down the mountain, did a wonderful job driving me down the mountain. We had to leave really early because there was a threatened strike, because apparently there was a rumor that the health code folks were going to come up there and shut down a lot of businesses for being out of compliance with various things, and that there was going to be a strike that would prevent people going up the mountain. And so I had to get up very, very early to go down the mountain. Coming down the mountain. And I'll conclude with the last paragraph of my mother's piece. This is my mother speaking. The last time I saw Cody, it had never looked more beautiful nor more serene. Monsoon winds and rains had not yet begun to lash the landscape, and evergreens and eucalyptus trees cast emerald shadows in an amethyst lake. Mount Paramal loomed and beckoned in the cloudless sky. Having taken my college board exams and packed a few belongings in a travel-worn trunk, I was about to make a final trip down the Ghat. After my parents had delivered me to the USS President Garfield, and I left Bombay on the long voyage to a new world, I would not see them again for 5 years. Closing the book on my Indian sojourn, I said farewell to my friends and teachers. The last person I spoke to was Mr. Johnson. Prophetically, he wrote in my autograph book, and I don't actually speak Latin. I think it's Forsan et haec olem meminese juvivat. It gives me pleasure to remember these things. So now it's Q&A. You just had a whirlwind tour of India or parts of India.
Great, Martha. I'm gonna just, I guess, jump in if I can with a question. For those of us in the West who, don't really have a strong connection to India, it seems that we read a lot about the strife there, civil strife, religion, all kinds of conflict. Did you sense any of that or see any of that?
I didn't. I don't recall seeing. Of course, it was a, obviously a highly organized trip. So the 3 weeks across Rajasthan was, we were mostly visiting, again, forts and palaces and stuff like that. Very, sort of tourist areas.
Sort of insulated, but
yeah, kind of insulated. The only, it was interesting. I was reading through my journal, as it's just fun to, go back and revisit. This does not have anything to do with civil strife, but has to do with it is a country, obviously, that's, a complex and complicated and one of contradictions. And I'll just read to you. This is from that little village, Narle village. And I wrote that, I was talking about just how touched I was to be able to go into this home of this family. And I'll just jump in the middle. In one home, 2 little boys lay on a floor listening to music. There is some electricity, but no electric stove or refrigerator or toilet or chairs or sofas. Basically just the bed frames that tuck underneath a stone shelf. Clever design. Streets are dirty with trash and cow dung. Our guide says people don't want to clean outside their homes for fear that others will think they are of the lower caste. The caste system has been made illegal, but it still exists in practice, and people do not want to be misperceived as of the outcast. So I thought that was really quite interesting, and then, there were certainly moments like, the village outside of Chhattisgarh Sagar camp, all these villagers that lived there. Well, I think the land was turned over to them when Indira Gandhi, turned land over from took land, basically, redistributed land from the princely Indian folks to, those who had farmed the land. That had happened. But the great-great-grandson of the, royal guy who, the noble Indian guy who dammed that area, like the great-great-grandson has inherited that property. The camp property where the luxury, tenting camp is. No, he gave us a tour of the village, and he brought us down in there. And so, there's still kind of vestiges of, him being sort of the benevolent landowner who's providing the water for the folks here, for the hardworking folks. It's clearly a stratified country, but, we weren't really immersed that fully into the culture, to experience it particularly firsthand. But there were ways in which the contradictions and certainly the disparity of wealth, we'd be in these beautiful heritage hotels, one of them, the windows, the shutters were closed. Well, when I opened the shutters, we're literally like a wall. We're just like a foot away from like, like a rundown house. I actually tried to show that in one of the photographs of, let me see if I can go back to, I don't know if I can go back to just, I don't know how to get through all the way back to the beginning, but in, right at the beginning in Ahmedabad where, sorry. There must be a better way to do this, but gotta be a better way. Yeah, there's obviously a better way, isn't there? But the problem is that I'm on 2 screens, and so it doesn't seem to allow me to. All right. if I haven't made you all really sick. Right here, like, so you can see, all right, so this, look at this, right? So here's this Haveli that's being, renovated. It's gorgeous. I showed that to you. The inner courtyard is, well, I mean, we're pretty much right across the street is this, right? You've got this juxtaposition that's right within, some cases a few feet of each other, right? I mean, certainly we saw intense poverty, tent cities along the streets. I mean, I just wasn't super comfortable photographing, I mean, already I'm not 100% comfortable with maybe some of the photographs. I mean, I always tried to ask people permission to take their photographs. But obviously in some cases I didn't. I was photographing them from behind, they're on a moped or something. I didn't want to be too voyeuristic, but, Vivek began our tour by quoting a pretty famous, it's from a British economist, you probably have heard it, but the original quote is, "The frustrating thing about India is that whatever you can rightly say about India, the opposite is also true." And Vivek's paraphrase of that was, "Whatever one says about India, the opposite will also be true."
Yeah.
So it is, I think, a pretty complex culture. I don't know, maybe Susan and Christine, do you have some other comments in response to Martin's question?
No, but I just want to mention something about the Narwhal village, where we walked into the village and, we like the lady who invited us into her house and obviously lived in, to say I think she was just sitting on the floor and yet next door or very close to that, there were some of these village homes which really looked quite smart because they had been renovated by children of these owners who had gone away to Bombay or wherever and got an education and mostly worked in IT from what I gather, and sent money back. And then, so there were some homes that were really, I'm not sure whether they had electricity in that, but they certainly looked quite well maintained from the outside. And then next to it was somebody like that woman, who lived in completely unmaintained house. And the other thing about that village was, I thought it was very interesting. We were walking down the street and some local woman ran up to me. She had two young children with a camera. Everybody seemed to have, like a smartphone, which is pretty true of a lot of kind of countries, and ran up, wanted to take a selfie with me and her children. I mean, this complete lack of, just running up to somebody and wanted to take a picture. Was thrilled about it, and I'm sure that picture, goodness knows where it is. But just so charming, just so charming and so open, and it struck me how, like you said, how friendly people were.
Martha, this is Ted. Hi, good to see you, and thank you for presenting this. It's just a wonderful trip. I was in Cody and at the grandparents' place in 1982, so 40 years ago. And I read everything I could read before I went. And I remember one of the books saying, India will assault your senses. And, you mentioned about being overwhelmed one day. There's incredible beauty and incredible ugliness. I mean, but you have to just sort of take it as it is. And I've been there, I guess, 3 or 4 times. And I just love, whenever I get a chance to be there. And I remember you showed that picture looking out at when up the upper floor there in Potherley of the place where our grandparents lived. And I remember my mother telling me when I was a child, how our grandfather would spend a couple of hours in devotions up there. And, as a child, you think, how in the world did he ever do that? Well, when I was there and you had so many people surrounding you and pushing you, I thought he needed that for his sanity, to just have some private time. And that was probably his place to do that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. The first 2 days that I was there, so when we were in Ahmedabad, which is a bustling, it's called had been a important textile city called sometimes the Manchester of the East. It's a pretty large city, and I was for a moment going, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I just need to get on the plane and go back home. And plus I'm taking malaria pills, and those things can totally whack you out. And there was a lot of pollution in the air, and I was really having a hard time, a lot of particulates that were bothering me. And that first place, I actually wasn't too keen on the food. I didn't think the food was super great at that particular hotel. And I thought, oh, what have I done? And I had to talk myself through that. I had to say, this is, you're not going home, Martha. You are not going home. That is not an option. You are staying here, girl, and you're doing this. And actually, this really was a very personal journey for me, as you all know. And a lot of it was about just connecting, yes, with our family. By the way, for those who don't know, also our great grandparents were in India, so it's 3 generations. So our great grandparents were in Northeast India back to 1884, and then our great grandparents were there from 1912 to 1951, so 40 years of their life. And then my mother was there for 18 years of her life. My daughter had already gone to India, so I was like, there was like, okay, I need to go. I got to keep that link. So there's 5
was of Indian
5 generations. Yeah,
going back to India, and they invited her to come with them for a little trip.
Yeah, so we needed 5 generations of Wooders over there. It felt to me, but in my research on my mother's life, this term that wasn't familiar with me before, but third culture kids. This TCKs, it's mentioned about kids who grow up predominantly outside their home cultures. Could be missionary kids, could be diplomat kids, could be military kids. Just folks who, for one reason or other, find themselves living predominantly outside their home culture. Until these psychologists came up with this term, third culture kid. And there are a lot of obviously wonderful benefits that come with that, that come with, living an international life. One of, a lot of, just incredible experiences. My mother, spoke multiple languages. She had an incredible facility she spoke Telugu fluently. It was one of her first languages. And she knew a bunch of other languages too. She was a classics major. She did go on to be a classics major, so she knew Latin and Greek. But she was a hidden immigrant. So that term was also unfamiliar to me, but it came up in this literature. So, she's a white woman. She could trace back to the blind Baptist William Whitter from Salem, Massachusetts, from 1639. She was so proud of that lineage. I've never really understood quite why until I realized, oh, this was her way of saying, I belong. I actually belong here in the United States, because she never felt she did. Because she came here as an immigrant would come here, with a whole different culture as part of her formative years. And so for me going, and obviously my mom didn't spend time in Rajasthan, but still nonetheless spending time there and in South India, of course, and exactly where she was walking, it gave me an understanding of the complexity for her and any person, any immigrant or any person who lives between cultures and doesn't quite know, where they fit, which was a problem for my mom. It was a total problem of like, which of these 2 worlds, do I belong? I don't really belong in India. I mean, as a white woman, I don't really fit into America. It was always a kind of identity crisis for her.
Along that line, Martha, I know some of my mother's idiosyncrasies. Going to India helped me understand some of them a little bit better in terms of, often reminding me to do things. And I found that the British must have done that with the Indians, and then some of them that did that with me. Don't forget your coat that's in the car, or do this. I mean, things that irritated me about my mother sometimes, but I became more understanding of the culture she grew up in.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Martha,
and did you go out to Coker's Walk at night?
Yes. Yeah.
The stars were just unbelievable there.
Yeah. Unfortunately, when I was there was never a clear night. So I never got that experience. But I did walk the very first night that was there. We went to this one of Prospect House, which I think had been owned by the school, but there was this little tea party. The people who were staying there were connected with the school in some way, and had a little tea party that night. Well, not tea party, but some kind of dinner thing. And so that right on the edge of Coker's Walk, I mean, sitting right above Coker's Walk, looking right over the edge. And then the day that I walked along the whole length of Coker's Walk, it was in the morning. So, but yeah, I never actually saw any stars when I was in Cody.
Oh, because they said because it's so far from any kind of light pollution, that the stars were incredible. And there was an observatory at that point. I don't know if there still is.
Yeah, there is an observatory up there. I would love to go back because I feel I was only, there for, 7 or 8 days. It was 10 days in South India, but 3 of them were on the plains. And then, like 7 or 8 days in Cody, which went really fast. It just, especially because I was leading writing workshops at the school and at the thing. So that was a couple days worth of, work days. So I just felt, and then I spent 2 or 3 days in the archives. So I spent a lot of time indoors actually while I was there. So I didn't really get to go out. I mean, I walked around the village quite a lot. And sometimes actually I did have to take, so when I asked Sarah Ann if it would be like safe for me as a single woman to be walking around Cody, I was like, I didn't know, she said, oh, you'll be perfectly safe in terms of people, but there's like wild bison up there now, and they have attacked and killed people. And so you want to be really careful at night. So I was like, okay, I'll take a taxi, taxi home at night. Not that it's that far away, but I didn't want to, come across any bison. But one day during broad daylight, I was walking home, and it's a very, just sort of narrow path. And I thought I saw a dog down at the end. And I also had heard there were some wild dogs that were pretty aggressive, and I'm terrified of dogs. So I started to walk back thinking, I better go back into town and take a taxi home. But then I didn't see the dog. So I thought, well, what the heck? Because I was so close to home, to Shelton Cottage. So when I got into Shelton Cottage, Merrick said, did you see the wild bison? I was like, what? He's like, oh yeah, they're right across the street in this forest, in the shola right across. So what I had seen was baby bison. And thankfully I made it home okay. That was like, yeah, pretty amazing. That most of the time I didn't feel like I did the monkeys at the Jain temple. I don't know, those made me a little nervous. They were pretty, they were so used to tourists and they wanted food and stuff, but they were pretty aggressive.
The monkeys are like that.
But otherwise, like we saw some crocodile, but they were the crocodile type. They weren't exactly crocodiles, but they were of that family. But I never saw any snakes or spiders, thankfully, because I don't really like spiders. Yeah, I'm surprised.
Martha, you crack me up with all your fears, yet you travel over to India just like that.
Thank you, because actually I am a very anxious person. So
really?
We know you, Martha. We know you.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that the Kubalo Jumbi wasn't the thing that sent you home. But anyway, or whatever that was.
Yeah, actually, it's when I talked with Tracy Baker White, who did the paintings, she spent a year living in India. So she spent a year living in Delhi when she was in her early 20s or late 20s. And I, called her, of course, when I got back from India to tell her everything about my trip. And she said, she's like, I'm really surprised you did so well. So I did better than people thought, because it was a process of having to let go, because it is a very, in the cities, in the cities, it's just a swirl. I mean, it's just like super sensory overload, as you were saying, Ted. It's just so much sounds and smells and noises and masses of people. I mean, it's hard to describe. And yeah, I mean, it was like, as I said, I had to give myself a pep talk in the first few days that managed to, serve me for the rest of the trip. Was like, you're not in charge here. You are not in charge. You just have to let go and go for the ride.
Well, Martha, we're nearing the end of our time. If there's anybody who has any questions before we wrap it up, please.
I can always talk to you privately, Martha, about
Right.
how disappointed
Sure.
I am. How disappointed I am that you didn't buy that rug.
Oh, I know.
Because
I know.
I think we should go back and buy that rug. Okay. And it
Yes, you
reminds
and I.
me, that's what the Orient was for Americans for a very long time. A place you went and saw this beautiful artwork, which took a whole lot of manual or female effort, and yet was beautiful and very inexpensive. My brother spent his Peace Corps time in Iran and got into the habit of buying carpets and owns several lovely carpets, and they're probably valuable at this point. So if you ever want to go back, and you can speak Telugu to this people and do the bargaining, and I'll just take care of the shipping.
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds great.
Thank you, Martha. This was wonderful.
Thanks.
I learned a bunch that I didn't know already.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, I learned stuff too. But
Yeah, me too.
I just wanted to say the photos were just stunning. I mean, really, really. And
Oh, thanks.
and it's just amazing. The buildings, the architecture, and all the I mean, just can't imagine the amount of work that went into producing those places. It's just amazing. But
Yeah.
Thank you, Martha. I think you captured the pictures with the colors were just so vivid to me. It just seemed to be a contrast because the backgrounds always seemed light, but then everything was their clothing and the tapestry, the boats, it just seemed to be such a contrast to me. The reds and the golds and the vivid colors. And you captured it so beautifully, but even their clothes they wore in the fields was golds and reds, and you would think someone out working in a field would be dressed in those elaborate colors, but you captured it beautifully. I loved it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, Martha.
Yeah, thanks all for coming. Thanks for this. I'm sorry it took longer than I had intended to, but I appreciate your patience.
It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great to see you all. So many people from different parts of my life. And thank you, Lisa, for staying a little longer. I know this is made your workday longer, but thank you.
This was not a trip that would fit in an hour. Thank you very much, Martha.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks all.
Thanks.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.